If you were to make it into office, could you maybe highlight, I know there's a lot of examples you could give, we have limited time here, but could you mainly highlight maybe some taxes you would propose cutting? Everyone's talking about cutting taxes, cutting taxes, cutting taxes. As you well know, they kind of fail to be specific.
Right.
They're kind of afraid to take a stance. Do you have anything in mind that you see that you would perhaps cut in terms of taxes?
My sign behind me says bold leader, bold solutions. You listen to Republican leadership, and I'm a Republican, but you listen to leadership, and they say, we need comprehensive reform. Comprehensive reform this, comprehensive reform that. You never hear an actual solution to the problem. When you talk about taxes, I believe in the fair tax. It's a 23% national consumption tax that does away with the IRS altogether. If you make $35,000 a year, you keep $35,000. If you make $1 million, you keep $1 million. Basically, the state of Texas has a sales tax. We would turn that into a national sales tax throughout the country. Do away with the IRS altogether. All those taxes goes away. I firmly believe the economy would be kicking if we did that. You can go to my website, grantstinchfield.com, for information on the fair tax, or I urge you to go to fairtax.org without me taking up your time to explain it. But it would help the state that we're in tremendously.
And just to clarify, I know you were very clear in your answer, so we appreciate that, but that would replace the current tax system.
It would throw out.
So not in addition to it.
No, it would throw out the current tax code. So here's what happens: as I go around North Texas talking to people, I get a third of the people say they like a flat tax. A third of the people say they like the fair tax, the consumption tax, and a third of the people, for whatever reason, they say keep it the same. What that tells me is 2/3 of the people say scrap the whole system. They say scrap the system. So to do that, because I'm a thoughtful leader, is I know we're not going to be able to get a fair tax through right away. So I want to go to territorial taxation. The first bill I'll introduce when I get to Washington is you pay the tax in the territory where you made it. We're talking about corporate taxes here. If a company goes to Italy and makes tax and makes profits in Italy, they pay the Italian tax, then the money can come back home tax-free. Okay, that's territorial taxation. Right now there's $1.6 trillion of American profits sitting offshore that we will never see the light of day coming back to this country because of the crazy tax structure that we have here. We moved to territorial taxation. If we have to take a step to a flat tax first because that has a little more support, then I'm okay with that. I'm okay to moving to a flat tax and then ultimately moving to the fair tax. So I understand we maybe have to take baby steps to get there, but we have to do something. One more thought on taxes. Career politicians say we need to change the tax code, we need to do this, we need to do that. It's something like 65,000 pages long. And miraculously, every year, what do these career politicians do? They add more pages to the tax code. My opponent, Kenny Marchant, sits on Ways and Means. They write tax code on that committee. Yet he says comprehensive reform. Well, I ask you and anybody else there watching this video, ask him what has he done to reduce the number of pages of that tax code. Before that, coincidentally, he sat on banking. What a mess banking was in. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Right. This relates to the previous question a little bit. Considering that you're a small business owner and that the small businesses are hindered with a tax burden that is very hard to overcome, what would you do to help in that regard?
Well, the fair tax does that because it does away with all taxes. So there's no more corporate tax. And I'll just use the example of my quick car oil change business. I charge $34.99 for an oil change. You do away with the current tax structure, and you're talking about a 23% sales tax on top of the $34.99. Here's the beautiful part about it. Everybody says, well, I don't want to pay on top of that. I don't want to buy a car and pay 23%. If you took away taxes out of my books, at my quick car, I don't have to pay payroll taxes anymore. I don't have to pay income taxes anymore. I don't have to pay capital gains taxes anymore. I don't have to pay compliance with the tax code, which costs a lot of money. My $34.99 oil change now comes down to maybe $29. So now you add 23% onto that, you're going to be close to what you were paying before. Whether it's an oil change or a Cadillac, the same thing's going to happen.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you. Would you be open to closing the government, shutting it down per se, as some people have characterized it as shutting it down, closing the government, if a budget is not presented and approved? Another way, or would you support a continuing resolution? Whatever, I understand that's ambiguous, but that's what they've been doing here recently. What's your viewpoint on that dynamic that's been happening in Washington?
I would ask you to if you have a budget for your families. And I would bet that you say yes.
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 The fact that the federal government does not have a budget now for going on years is insane. Okay? We have to get a budget. We need to not only cut our budget, we need to cap how much we spend, and we need to get a real numbers there. Okay? It's crazy. So you asked, would I be willing to shut down the government? Here's the wild thing, and you almost fell into the liberal trap. The liberals want you to think that if we don't raise the debt ceiling, that we have to shut down the government. That is absolutely false. I'd be willing to shut down the government, but I'd put a 99% chance we don't have to shut down the government. We have revenue coming in. All we need to do is pass laws that'll say what the money gets spent on first. Okay? We want to pay our troops in the field. We want to pay our people who get Social Security that depend on that. And we go down the line and prioritize it. We could do that legislatively by not increasing the debt ceiling while we're fighting over making sure that we have a budget. Don't let the liberals make you think that the world ends when we don't raise the debt ceiling. Apparently, they tricked my opponent into that. Kenny Marchant came home and said he wouldn't raise the debt ceiling. And then I don't know who he went back up to Washington and talked to. He went up there and voted to increase it. Well, this thing had been being quietly increased over and over and over again, but until the Tea Party came and demanded accountability, that's only when we realized just how crazy things were. Yet, Kenny Marchant still voted to increase the debt ceiling. We've got to send leaders to Washington who are willing to say no and who are willing to say enough is enough.
Thank you.
If you make it into office, will you promise to support all pro-life legislation and never support any pro-choice legislation?
Absolutely. We need to stop funding any federal money going towards any association that's associated with abortions. Bottom line, that's key. I'm sure any candidate that runs in District 24 is going to be on board with that, that's running as a conservative Republican.
Thank you.
Thank you. Term limits, and this is our last question we have here, unless there's any maybe follow-up questions if you want to clarify. Term limits of those in office can reduce the personal influence that some legislators have over other legislators in terms of their tenure in office. Are you for or against having term limits, and why, if you could explain?
Everywhere I go, I tell people right off the bat I'm going to term limit myself 8 years, providing I get reelected and the voters want me there. 8 years is enough time to serve in Washington. I'm on board. If we get to an agreement where they say 12 years, where they say 6 years, let's get it done. I knock on doors over and over again. I have only met one person who says they're not for term limits. Kenny Marchant. That's a joke.
Yeah.
But I've only met one person in all the doors that I've knocked on since September who said they're not for term limits. Yet career politicians will tell you, oh, we can't get a constitutional amendment to get it done. I ask you, why not? Did they try? I really don't think they've even tried. So we've got to get that done.
Well, George Washington term limited himself. He just chose not to run again.
Well,
and that's what some of these could choose to do. I'm sure you'll agree.
And that's what I would choose to do as well. So I'll follow in George Washington's footsteps. He'd be a pretty good guy to follow. It's no coincidence that my son's initials is GW. So, Grant Wyatt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Stinchfield. We appreciate the time that you've given us, and that would be all.
Thank you. It's good service you folks do here. Thank you very, very much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.